So let's get cracking and carry on with doing some more. So to mix more paints, we need more water. We need a bit more this time because we're doing one of the mountains, but this time we need quite a bit of paint in there because we need a darker edge to stand out against the sky. And sometimes it does help. In fact, it's not just sometimes, it usually helps if you have a scrap of paper, so we can go against the sky and see how it looks, and that looks quite pleasant. So we will stick with that. Now we don't want to do both mountains first, so I'll start with that one again. We don't want to do both mountains at the same time because we might get that cauliflower effect I was talking about earlier. So what we want to do is, I've decided we're going to do the back mountain. I hope I don't damage it because we don't want to blow up that mountain. Sorry. Right, so all we do is go along the edge of the mountain. I mean, we could actually wet this again, but I actually like having it where I can control a little bit of where the paint goes this time. And again, you want it darker at the top than you do at the bottom. I actually think I've made this one just a little bit dark for this mountain, to be brutally honest, but it might show up better on camera doing it this way, so I'm not all that fussed. Obviously when it comes down to, if you decide to do your own, then obviously you would need to work out how it's going to look and do it as best as you can, because you want the furthest things away from you paler than the ones towards the foreground. And if you're doing the colour painting, you would also need to have in distant objects more blue. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into my water. I'm going to put the palette back down there. I'm going to get into the water, dry a little bit off on a piece of paper, and just go over the edges, and that will bring that hard edge to a bit more of a softer edge. Also, it will allow weird little shapes to appear in the paint, which can give the idea of texture. Little dips and valleys in your hill, a mountain, whatever it may be. Different classes of hill. And here we go. Got a bit too much water on there. So what I'm going to do is rinse off again, clean on a piece of paper, and just dab little areas where I feel as though there's too much water. I'm going to dab. That will just pull the paint straight off. It won't move the paint around. Sometimes, like here, I'm going to go over the paint because, as I said earlier, I've got too much on. It's going to look too dark, and if your background's too dark, when you get to the foreground you've nothing to play with. You really need your foreground dark. So we'll go with that. I think we'll call that mountain, that hill, whatever you want to call it, finished. Okay, so how's that looking on camera? That's looking pretty good on camera, well, from where I'm standing anyway. One thing I didn't tell you earlier, when I first set up, tissue paper. You need loads of the stuff. Kitchen roll, one of the old blue J cloths or whatever you call them. Absolutely ideal for this sort of thing. Oh, excuse me, live video, live cough. Right, so that's that hill done. What we can do in the foreground on this one, well, with it being a bit further in, we could do with it being a little darker. That was not what I wanted to do. Oh dear. I have just dropped my palette. I made a dollop on my painting. Little things like this can sometimes be salvaged if you get at it quick enough. If you do it and ignore it, then what happens is it's ruined. If we get some water on it, dab it up quickly, get some water on it. This is going to be all covered anyway, but we just want to try and get as much up of it as we can now. And just keep scrubbing it with a brush. It will come off. Well, I'm not saying it will come off, even though I just said it will come off. It won't come off completely. It won't go back to being a nice white piece of paper. It will fade. It will fade near enough down to nothing. You can hardly see it now. So hopefully that will not affect what we're going to do in that area. That area is going to be water anyway, so fingers crossed it should be okay. But after doing that and losing some of my paints, I'm going to have to make some more mix. So let's get cracking with that then. I've squoze too much paint out of my palette anyway. You don't need a lot of the watercolour paint. I prefer to use tubes. Lots of people prefer to use pans. I prefer tubes. I just can't deal with pans at all for some strange reason, except in the kitchen. Okay, so we're going to start over here now. We're going to do exactly the same thing. We're just making the top of the mountain. As I said, you could do this exactly the same thing as you did with the sky, which is wet the mountain first. It is a technique I tend to use quite often, but just for the sake of quickness, I've decided I'm going to do it this way instead, because it gives a more what's the word I'm looking for? It's not dappled. It gives a stronger image, and sometimes when it breaks and the paint coverage breaks up like that, it gives a lovely little effect, which you won't get if you use water. And if you've gone over areas again, like for instance, I don't know whether you can see that you've got a darker piece there where the light is coming from that side. In fact, I'm going to go over it again because it's not standing out from that rear mountain. So I'm going to do that. And painting is intuitive. You see, when you start doing something, it sometimes makes you think it's not quite right, in which case you do something about it. See if you could make it look different. You know, and you say, I'm not going all the way down with the paint, I'm allowing the paint to trail off as it gets closer to our horizon line, and that's so it makes it look paler and pushes it back just that little bit. It also makes it look as though there's little areas where the sun's catching it, as you can see there. So that's what I was saying about the shades of the hills. In the foreground you want it darker than the background. So as you can see from the background hill is quite light. That coming forward makes it look as though it's nearer and closer to us. Now when we get further down here, when we start doing foreground detail, like grasses and bushes, possibly a tree, don't know yet, that will be darker still. There'll be not much water in that, and it will look even closer, so it's going to push those hills right back. Now next thing we're going to do once these hills have dried is water, and we're going to do that with, I think we are going to use this brush, this green brush. We're going to use that. It's a very simple technique. I'll show you the technique now while we're waiting for the things to dry. It's basically straight across, just like that, and then from that side. Simple. I know there's not much while I've showed it here, but trust me, it is simple, it is easy. For watercolour, it's because watercolour is the hardest medium to work in as far as I'm concerned. I much prefer using the acrylics or the water soluble oils, but I started off with watercolour about 12 years ago, and in fact it's near enough 12 years exactly when I first started off, and I used to love doing watercolours. Now I'm not really too keen. Anyway, I'm going to move the camera, I'm going to switch the camera, not move the camera, I'm going to switch the camera off now and give the mountains time to dry, and then I will be back with you when it's time to do the water in the foreground, in the middle ground, sorry. Okay, so I shall see you in a bit. Hello again, the thingies have dried, the mountains, so we'll get cracking with the water. And as I said, it's quite a simple procedure. You make sure your paper is dry, you get your paint on your brush, and because you don't get what's the word, completely level brushes in these, you'll get some breaks, as you can see, and these breaks will give you a really good water effect. So if we go horizontally from the left of the page inwards, and then from the right of the page inwards, where it meets in the middle you might get that band where it looks as though the sun is coming down, being reflected. So let's give it a try, shall we? So don't worry if oops, this is because I'm running on the wrong side to how I usually run. I'll have to try and do something about that, because the one thing you don't want is a wiggly bit of water. Oh dear. Now we've run out of water here. So, not run out of water, run out of paint, so I'm going to mix some more. Oh, I'm going to do it with this brush that we're using now. I also think it will be near enough the same colour, same shade as the last one was. that's fine. So let's carry on. It's not going exactly to plan, but that's the joy of watercolour. It doesn't always. You can plan how you want it to go, but depending on how the paper wants to take the water, how the brush wants to give you the water, you may not get it. But there you go, there's your water. And you've got a nice bit of sunlight sparkling there on the water. And now we want the foreground. And this is going to be incredibly dark. It's going to be really thick paint. And we're going to be using the same brush that we used to use for the water. And we're just going to starting off on the masking tape below, we're going to just bring the brush upwards, and that will give you the look of leaves, grass and various other nice bits and pieces like that. And I've just done the cardinal rule of reaching over to get my water and bringing the brush back over the painting. You don't do that. So we're going to do the land here, because this is the bit that we're standing on to look over the water to see the mountains. So we can say we're hiding behind a bush. If you want, you can move it round like I suddenly started doing, and that will give you different textures and make it look as though there's more things going on.